Okay, so I'm making this video to give a presentation of sorts that I'm calling an introduction to technical intelligence and the technological imposition. And what I'm going to be talking about in this video is ideas and thoughts around technology, what it is, technical intelligence, and I'll explain more about what I mean by that a little bit later. How technology manifests in society, how it changes society and the human being, and how we're under an imposition, a technological imposition that is imposing a way of life onto humanity. I want to say that there's been a philosophy of technology around for a while, thinking about what it is, like what is the essence of technology. Um, and I have been reading and thinking about this uh, topic a lot in the last year and a half or so. And I think it's something that's really important and probably one of the, if not the most important topic most of us aren't really aware of or don't think about at all, even though our daily lives are totally under the control of technology. Um, so the purpose of this presentation is just going to be to introduce some of these points, to hopefully get more people thinking about this. So the purpose of this presentation, to better understand what technical intelligence is, and I'll speak about that, what I mean by technical intelligence in the next slide, how it expresses itself on this planet, how it operates, how its manifestations and expressions are influencing and affecting humanity, and how humanity is under a technological imposition. So these are some of the key terms I'm going to be using that I wanted to lay out, just to clear up any possible confusion, because I'm going to be using some of these interchangeably with each other, and you'll probably pick up on that. And so I wanted to explain what I mean by some of these. So technical intelligence. What I'm meaning with that is the actual life force behind technology and the expression of technology. What is its spirit or essence? What's the creative force behind technology? What is the intelligence that is driving the expression of technology? And this is more of a universal force. So if we think of nature, nature has its own intelligence. You can see the intelligence and how there's a harmony, there's a balance to life. There's intelligence in the flora and the fauna and wildlife and how they work together. And technology is not actually a product of nature. It's a separate thing. It's a product of innovation, of conscious physical innovation. And I also want to say that I'm going to be talking about specifically the expression of technology on this planet, because obviously I don't know what the expression of technology could be like or is throughout the universe, even though we know that there is technology, there has to be technology throughout the universe, and the expressions may differ. I just don't know that, so I don't want to talk about this as if it's a a universal expression. Like when I said that technical intelligence is a universal force, what I'm meaning is an intelligence directing the expression of technology that is beyond the scope of a physical container. Like the intelligence we have as a human being is confined by our physical vessel. But the intelligence of nature, that is something beyond. It's not encapsulated in, I mean, I guess you could say it's encapsulated in the planet, but it's a greater force directing the expression of life. And so that's what I mean with technical intelligence, a force directing the expression of technology on the planet. And technology itself is the physical manifestation of technical intelligence. So the actual physical tool or object or life, if you want to think of it like that. And I will use the terms technical intelligence and technology pretty interchangeably. So you can almost think of them for this presentation as the same thing. Like there's technical intelligence in technology. And so when I'm referring to technology, it has technical intelligence in it. If that makes sense. I hope I'm not confusing you further. So industrial technological society. Society that's based on engineering and manufacturing technology to make production and life easier, faster, and more efficient. So a society that revolves around the production and innovation of technology. The system is the collective entity of industrial technological society. So its governing forces, the institutions, the ways of life, the values that direct the lives of individuals. And I'll use industrial technological society and the system interchangeably sometimes. And you can see how each definition almost fits inside the next one. Like you can't have industrial technological society without technology. You can't have the system without industrial technological society or technology. They all fit in each other. So that's another reason why I tend to use them interchangeably. So technical intelligence / technology, it's a metaphysical force. It's a creative force. You can think of it as its own species of life. I think that's helpful to think of. So the term technical intelligence was coined by George Cavassalis as another term for artificial intelligence. And his reasoning is because when we use the term artificial intelligence, it has this, it implies a superiority of human life and an inferiority to technical life. And it's really a defense mechanism for our ego. We can think about it like that. That calling it artificial is causing us to underestimate the reality of our situation and the technological imposition we are under. And the main goal of this presentation is to lay out in a more serious manner this imposition and try to prick your psyche, prick the psyche of whoever's watching this, to start to acknowledge the reality of the state of existence we're in and the power technology has over the human life. So the expressions of technology they range from something very simple, like a hammer, to something very complex, like an airplane. And so technology has always existed for human beings, with the most part. It's a tool we use to better our survival, to make things easier for us in our lives. But there comes a point, and it's a kind of arbitrary point that I don't think we can really define this point, where technology almost overtakes the human being, and it's no longer the human being that is using the technology. It is the technology that is using the human being to further its evolution, to further its innovation. And so I'm talking about technology in this presentation. I'm not referring to simple technology that we've basically always used, like hammers, tools, spears, things like that. So technology is not something that's inherently bad. Its purpose is actually inherently helpful to humans. It's simply a physical tool used to achieve an objective or goal. But how technology has developed, expressed, and infiltrated our societies is causing massive damage to human nature, human freedom, and the planet as a whole. And this is what I want to draw attention to. We all know the benefits of technology, but I don't think we really care to contemplate on the dangers. So, the anatomy of TI, what it is. So also, just to be clear, whenever I say TI, I'm referring to technological intelligence. I just want to make that clear. So the anatomy of TI, or what is the makeup of technology? What are its characteristics as we see them on the planet? So technology is a tool used to achieve some purpose or goal. It operates off of predictability and protocol. So think of an expression of technology like a computer. Every button or sequence of keys corresponds to a specific repeatable result. So there has to be this predictability to technology in order for it to achieve the goal or purpose that we're using it for. Efficiency and productivity are its most valuable attributes. So there's a constant striving to increase them. We're always wanting to make things more efficient, more productive. And that's kind of the driving ethos of technology and technological innovation, and really the driving ethos of our society. It appeals to the intellect, so it has a logical, reason-based existence. Going back to what I said about it being the product of intelligent innovation, conscious innovation. So it was reasoned into existence. It has a mechanistic, rigid structure. So this is needed to achieve predictability and repeatable results. Going back to the example of the computer, it has to be mechanistic. It has to be rigid, meaning that there's an exact method, an exact result for every key you hit. It doesn't differ. If I hit the F key, it's gonna type an F. It's not gonna type a different letter unless we change the wiring or the software somehow. So it needs this structure. It needs a mechanistic structure in order to be totally predictable and to stick to a protocol. So, in summary, it's an expression of life that is completely goal-driven with a focus on efficiency, productivity, predictability, and logic, which it is perpetually striving to increase. And has a mechanistic, firm structure in how it operates and underlying its expressions and forms. So I just want to leave that up for 1 second and to think about these characteristics, what they are, what they look like. And then I want to show some pictures while thinking about these characteristics of technology. So these are just pictures of our society, different environments, different methods of living that now are the protocols of our lives. And I think you can clearly see the characteristics of technology in all of these things. You can see the structure, the need for conformity, for protocol to produce predictability. There's a focus on efficiency. Just thinking of the highways, they're constructed to make the most efficient routes from point A to point B. Look at the layout of the grocery store. Everything's in its exact spot. Then we have the picture of the guy working at the bottom, which, as we all know, our professions, the values of our work revolve around being as efficient and productive as possible. These are the values driving our lives. And we have had to construct society around these values because our days are so filled with errands and protocols and work. We need to have a grocery store that has everything laid out where we know it's going to be, where we can find it easily, to make the shopping experience as easy as possible, as quick as possible. Same with the roads, and with the school, you can just see the layout of the desks, putting everyone in rows. There's a sense with school, a sense of protocol you have to follow that's instilled in you. And school is a conformist factory of sorts to produce people who have the skills that are and the knowledge needed to produce in technological society. So, and there's just so many examples. These are just 4 where I think we can clearly see the characteristics and values of technology and how they have manifested in our daily lives. So our societal values have become technological values. Western society has spearheaded technological advancement the last several hundred years under the direction of progress. With this progress, we have structured society to serve technological production and innovation. We have developed institutions and ways of living to promote individual efficiency and productivity. In service to the industrial technological system, our days are scheduled and structured to promote these values. We earn status and technological/material comfort based on our contributions and productivity to the system. We earn money and are encouraged to spend it on technology to keep us pacified and promote the system, to promote it economically with the buying and selling and innovation of technology. We are conditioned to conform to be good, productive citizens through the school system, the mainstream media, and other forms of social conditioning. We need to be as programmable and predictable as possible. Intellectual knowledge and scientific pursuit are held in the highest esteem as they do the most to contribute to technological progress. So the leaders of our societies are those who are the most intellectually and scientifically capable in most regards. I mean, we can make an argument about politicians and whatnot, but really, it's the innovators who are driving our societies. Like, do you think your local, or let's say state, do you think your state government has more power than Google or Facebook? I don't. Or Apple. Those with the highest forms of technology, the most resources, are the ones who control society. Okay, sorry, I have to keep pausing and restarting this. So we can think of that first point, how our societies our cultures have adopted technological values as our own, as one of the main points of how we are under a technological imposition, how technology helps impose ways of life on humans and our societies. Another big point is that technology constricts human independence and freedom. So every time a technology is adopted, there is a compromise of human freedom. A person must compromise their time, ability, and choice for the method, technique, convenience, and comfort of the technology. Because technological technique is so efficient and society values and emphasizes efficiency, individuals are forced to submit to technology. What a person once had to exercise significant mental and physical ingenuity and effort to achieve is now outsourced to technology. This has happened to such a degree that the modern human being is now reliant on technology for their survival. Thus, technology holds significant power over human beings. So, because our society, there is such an emphasis on efficiency and productivity, we have to use the tools that provide and promote these things. And the human being by itself does not really hold up to what technology and technological techniques are able to produce, what they're able to provide. And so we are forced to submit to using technology in order to keep up. We can also see how we have developed such a dependency on technology to survive that technology itself holds, in a lot of ways, our existence in its hands. Because most of us aren't able to survive without the technological tools that we all rely on now. And this should worry people, I think. I think we should be worried at how our skills, our survival skills, have atrophied to such a large extent because of us outsourcing them to technology. So the reality of our situation is that humanity is not free because of this dependency. Essentially, every facet of our lives is mediated by technology. The human being's existence is now regulated by technology. Technology has atrophied our capabilities for providing for our own needs in exchange for comfort and convenience. The autonomous human being is nearly extinct. So there isn't an aspect of society that I can think of where we don't find technology or technological dependence. I mean, everything we do is mediated by technology in some way. We can't get groceries without using technology. If the cash register's down, it's not like we can exchange cash, or, I mean, now they're doing away with cash, but we can't barter for things in stores. We can't get our money out of a bank if the technology doesn't allow it. It's just everywhere. So I just wanted to include this quote in here because I think it really encapsulates our situation. The difference between technology and slavery is that slaves are fully aware that they are not free. And I think this is absolutely the reality of our situation, that we are so enamored with technology and dependent on it, we don't see how it is controlling our lives. So technology always encroaches on human freedom. Whenever technology is introduced into a society, it is presented as a choice, and typically a benevolent one. However, once introduced and adopted by a portion of the population, society restructures itself around this technology. Soon enough, it becomes a necessary component of operating in society. What starts as an option often becomes forced on individuals. So every time a technology is adopted and integrated into society, it often becomes impossible to live without this technology because society begins to structure itself around it. Aspects of our lives begin to be structured around it. And so we really don't have a choice to not use the specific technologies that are introduced, which there's numerous examples of this. But what I wanted to do was to read this example out of a piece of work called Industrial Society and Its Future by Ted Kaczynski. And yes, he was the Unabomber. And this is saying nothing of what he did, but what he wrote. And his arguments are very well argued. They're very convincing, in my view, and they deserve to be contemplated on, I think. So this is from his manifesto. Consider motorized transport. A walking man formerly could go wherever he pleased, go at his own pace without observing any traffic regulations, and was independent of technological support systems. When motor vehicles were introduced, they appeared to increase man's freedom. They took no freedom away from the walking man. No one had to have an automobile if he didn't want one. And anyone who did choose to buy an automobile could travel much faster and farther than a walking man. But the introduction of motorized transport soon changed society in such a way as to restrict greatly man's freedom of locomotion. When automobiles became numerous, it became necessary to regulate their use extensively. In a car, especially in densely populated areas, one cannot just go where one likes at one's own pace. One's movement is governed by the flow of traffic and by various traffic laws. One is tied down by various obligations, license requirements, driver's test, renewing registration, insurance, maintenance required for safety, monthly payments on purchase price. Moreover, the use of motorized transport is no longer optional. Since the introduction of motorized transport, the arrangement of our cities has changed in such a way that the majority of people no longer live within walking distance of their place of employment, shopping areas, and recreational opportunities, so that they have to depend on the automobile for transportation, or else they must use public transportation, in which case they have even less control over their own movement than when driving a car. So this perfectly lays out to me how the adoption of technology, of the automobile, took over our freedom of travel. And this probably sounds crazy to most people because, of course, we like having automobiles. Of course, we like being able to drive and go long distances. Like we were limited before automobiles with where we could travel. And motorized vehicles open up the opportunities and possibilities for us. But with that, they also took away freedom. They took away our choice. We no longer have a choice, practically speaking, for most of us to live in society and not have a automobile. It also introduces more regulations on how we can live, because when we drive, there are all these laws, there are traffic signs, there's maintenance, there's upkeep, there's rules to be able to drive in the first place, requirements. And so we're still not able to drive how we want to. We have to follow protocol. And this is necessary, I think we would agree, for safety reasons. But still, that doesn't change the point that the adoption of technology essentially takes away our choice in many instances not to be able to use it and imposes more regulations on how we live, more protocol on how we live. So it's making us more mechanized, more machine-like. So, this is another point for how we are under a technological imposition. The system modifies human nature and behavior. So, individuals are pressured to conform to ways of thinking, acting, and behaving so industrial technological society continues to run smoothly. To do this, individuals have to be modified and trained not to act off impulses, to want what the system offers, and to adapt to the circumstances of industrial technological society. Techniques are employed for this, such as propaganda, child rearing practices in schooling, advertising campaigns, and other forms of psychological manipulation. So, tools and techniques based on technology or the values of technology on conforming people to the system to make them productive members of society, modifying them, putting them in boxes that are deemed acceptable, manipulating and coercing them to adapt and live and produce in industrial technological society. So, for instance, child rearing practices. Now, obviously, there have always been child rearing practices since the dawn of time. We have had to develop ways to teach children, to help them survive, but the difference now is the focus on developing the most absolutely efficient techniques. So it's no longer, it's becoming less and less the parent's choice. It's the techniques, the system, the society produces that says are the most effective. So you see how this modification also takes away human choice, human freedom. And listen, we can argue about if the reasons that some of these things are developed, like child rearing practices, the people developing them mostly are doing it for benevolent reasons. They want children to be happier and healthier. But you cannot argue that they are also, whether they know it or not, serving the system, because they are developing ways of conforming people to adapt and live in society, in the system we have. And it is all of these things, all these techniques are used to coerce, to enforce a type of conformity that the system, those running the system, deem acceptable, deem valuable, deem important to the cohesiveness and harmony of society. And sometimes what is best for human freedom and human health does go hand in hand with what the system wants. But I think the most important thing is to acknowledge how the techniques we live by and the techniques used on us to influence how we live, to influence our well-being or health or anything, are mostly fundamentally technical tools to produce a citizen that, yes, people may say they're helping develop a citizen that is well-adjusted and happy and healthy, and why wouldn't someone want this? But it is also developing a citizen who is most valuable to the system. And in doing this, it is taking away choice and autonomy. And some people may be fine giving that up. Okay, that's your choice. But it shouldn't be enforced on all of society, especially when most of us can't see these things. We don't know. Our consent isn't really, it isn't full consent because we don't know what we're giving up truly. So there are also physical tactics, such as punishment by law enforcement. The laws and rules of the system are enforced by force to ensure a necessary harmony and societal cohesion to prevent a breakdown of the system. So we also have the enforcers of the system who use force, who use violence, who are deemed justified in their use of violence, and who are may be justified in some cases if they are protecting an individual from um, something that is someone, a person, or institution or entity that is trying to abuse them in some way or hurt them. But by and large, law enforcement is there to enforce the will of the system, because you have to have that to promote cohesion and harmony and make sure people follow the rules, follow that they live a protocol life, that they regulate their own existence because they are scared of getting out of line. So modification is also carried out through medical intervention. For example, antipsychotic, antidepressant, anti-anxiety, and mood stabilizing drugs ultimately are used to help someone assimilate as best as possible into the living conditions created by industrial technological society. Psychological counseling also serves this purpose. So again, here are some examples of techniques and tools that are being used by people who are doing it for mostly benevolent reasons, I assume, but are ultimately are there to help someone assimilate into society and the system and to be productive members of society that serve the industrial technological system. And when we think about mental health issues, and I'm going to touch on this later, I truly believe that the conditions and circumstances created by technological society and our separation from nature and what is natural is creating an increase in mental health issues and anxiety and depression and despair and hopelessness. And this goes hand in hand with our loss of autonomy, but I don't get too much into that right now. And so notice how the system, technological industrial society, creates issues in the human being, but then develops the tools to treat those issues. It's a nice trick. So symptoms of dissatisfaction, unhappiness, and despair brought about or influenced by a technological society are targeted by technological interventions and distractions in order to help a person cope and adapt with societal conditions. So this is what I was just talking about, creating technological means that are tools for coping with the unhappiness of our situations. Okay. So, future forms of modifications. considering the basic forms of modifications just touched on, it's not hard to imagine a future as technological society advances where human beings are nothing but engineered products. There will be, and already is, gene editing technology, for instance, as society develops the tools to further understand the physiological correlates of behavior, as well as the technology to edit and modify such behavior. What we think and feel and how we behave will be able to be completely modified. Anything deemed undesirable to society or inefficient and unproductive will be able to be removed through technological intervention. So it's not hard to think about how rapidly technology is developing the last 100 years, and to think about in the next 100 years what tools will be available for medical interventions where they understand what genes are associated with specific behaviors, specific personalities, maybe even thinking, or thought types. Like there's a big push to label people conspiracy theorists nowadays. So think of if they have the tools to turn off the genes that are associated with being a conspiracy theorist, or the brain functions, the components that are associated with any type of undesirable behavior. For instance, any type of criminality. They will be able to basically edit a human being to turn these attributes off and on. I don't think it's far-fetched to think about that technology being developed. And we can think of a future where they have this technology and what it will be like whenever a baby is born. And they have these specific traits, these genes that are associated with these unwanted behaviors. It will be unethical to bring a baby into the world that has these things. So it's not hard to think about it being mandated to not allow people born into the world with these specific physiological components and attributes. And we can even think of a future where the technology is developed to eradicate something like a pesky emotion like sadness. Sadness isn't productive or efficient. What if they could just turn off the parts of the brain associated with sadness without affecting anything else? Like without damaging a person too much. Wouldn't it become unethical to allow something like sadness to exist? I don't know, but I don't think it's too far out to think about. And so if this will happen when the technological means are available, should be less of our concern than the fact that without a disruption in technological advancement, the technology will inevitably be developed where this can occur. So if there isn't any disruption of technology, technological innovation, and that probably wouldn't happen without some type of cataclysmic or large scale event where either one, people become aware of how dependent we are on technology, and maybe we say, hey, we should probably slow this down, or where just enough of the technological system is wiped out, it takes too long to build it back, or we decide not to build it back. Those are the two most likely options for this being, for there being a disruption in technological advancement that I can think of, besides, anything that's going to be either a cataclysmic type physical freak act of nature that happens, or if there's somehow a shift in people's consciousness and values in a big way. Those are the main ways I can think of there being a disruption and innovation. If not, then there will inevitably be a future where technological modifications of this nature exist and are used on the population. And so this would be the result of that. Think about the perfect tools for engineering conformity, to engineering slaves that enjoy, or at least are neutral to their enslavement, that don't have the capacity to feel or think differently about their situation because those things have been edited, turned off, erased. So this is a big characteristic also of technological existence in our society, and dangerous characteristic, really. So constant expansion and self-augmentation. Technological expansion and development has become a self-augmented property of society, meaning technological growth has become directed by technology itself. The human being has become so reliant on efficient technique, driven by technological innovation, that society has no choice but to continuously engineer and produce better and better technology. Economies are dependent on it. Essentially, human society works for technical intelligence now, finding ways to improve and expand technological techniques over every aspect of human life. So technological innovation really isn't under the regulation of human beings anymore. In fact, its expansion is actually driven by technology itself and the adoption of technological values that are now the values of our society, that are now pushing forward technological innovation, efficiency, and productivity over all else. So, also, when a technology is introduced, it creates the need for a multiplication of other technologies and industries. This multiplication is a self-sustaining process for technological expansion. So every time a technology is introduced, it creates the conditions and the need for other forms of technologies to be adopted, or industries to be adopted, and just further interweaves this web of technological necessity. So we think of the internal combustion engine. think of that invention, then think of the automobile. Think of all the parts that go into an automobile. So then we have the need for the maintenance and upkeep. We have the need for the roadways, traffic lights, the registration and licenses, all these different components that become interweaved into society that multiplies this initial technological impact over a large area of society and life. And that's not even considering all the different variations in automobiles, all the different brands, all these this vast amount of choice of the expression of the automobile, of the parts that go into it, the variety, the industries needed to implement this technology into society. It's just a process that continues to grow and integrate technology into society. It's a constant expansion. So I think it's really fair to say that technological expansion and innovation is now a self-directed process out of the hands of the human being and our society. So technology is a contrast of biological life. Human beings are not born into the world as mechanistic, fixed entities, which contrast with the mechanical existence of technology. Human beings need spontaneity, flexibility, and self-directed creative expression to satisfy our spiritual human nature. We do need structure, but too much structure and it becomes deadly to our spirit. Industrial technological society pressures and molds us to be more machine-like, to adopt technological values as our own, to measure our worth and purpose by efficiency and productivity. It encourages and coerces us to be predictable and programmable. It inserts protocol into all areas of life, and we are forced to accept regulations in our daily lives that come with technological development and application. Essentially, the limits that structure how we live our lives no longer comes solely from nature, but technology itself and the society built around it. So, the human being used to be limited by nature itself, by the limits of the body, by the limits of the environment. But now, the human being is limited by the constraints of the society we live in, the technology it builds, the values, the ways of life that we now adopt to be members of technological industrial society. And this contrast to technical and biological life. You can see how we are becoming more mechanistic. Our society is more mechanistic, it's more conformist, it's more regulated. It's a mechanical existence. The structure is too rigid. It's too rigid. Everyone feels it. Everyone loathes how we live, how our society is built. But we accept it. And some of those reasons is because the technological products that are given to us to subdue and suppress our unhappiness. But the main point is we are becoming more machine-like, and we are losing what it is to be a biological, autonomous, free-spirited human being. Also, technological society creates conditions that aren't natural. So we evolved in small, close, intimate communities that provided for all our needs. Now communities are much larger and more densely populated. This has resulted in a disconnection from the human beings we live around, as well as a dependence on large-scale industries. This ultimately results in a sense of helplessness, isolation, and a lack of cooperation. So we evolved and developed in small communities that provided for all of our needs. It provided connection with others, with nature, with ourselves, because we had an autonomy about us, where we had the skills to survive, and the community had the skills to survive together. But now that has moved to being dependent on large scale industries to provide for our needs, even in small communities. So we are dependent on these industries, on people we don't even know, and we have an innate sense of helplessness, of isolation. So losing the self-reliance and autonomy leaves us vulnerable to anxiety, worry, depression, and fear. This is what I was talking about earlier when I mentioned how the technological society we live in creates conditions that exacerbate mental health issues. You take away reliance, self-reliance and autonomy, and confidence, and empowerment, and you replace them with their opposites, with dependency, with worry, depression, fear, disempowerment, anxiety. So we have less say over our own lives. Politicians, corporate executives, scientists, and bureaucrats make decisions we have little to no say over. So living in small communities, we have more of a voice over what was going on in that community. Now, our societies are run by politicians we're never going to meet, we're never going to interact with. Faceless executives and scientists that are affecting our lives and the lives of our environments, but individually, we don't really have any say over what they do. I mean, people are creating and tinkering with things, innovating with things that we don't have any say over. We do not consciously or explicitly consent to. But these things still have the potential to affect us in great ways. And so this also goes back to feelings of disempowerment, anxiety, helplessness. We also have a disconnection from nature. We no longer have a solid connection to our foundation. So nature is our foundation. Nature changes very gradually, while technological advancements, these result in rapid societal changes. So our stability that we once had in nature has been replaced with an unstable, shaky ground based on technology and what technology can provide us. So this also results in anxiety and disempowerment, not feeling whole, centered. And this disconnection from nature in our natural environments, it results in a lot of things. One of them is environmental destruction. I mean, how polluted and ravaged is the planet because of, well, I won't say only because of, but directly related to technological production, technological tools. I mean, human beings by themselves could not cause near the destruction on the planet that has occurred with the tools of technology. Even though human beings are the ones using the tools, I think the tools deserve to be scrutinized for all the reasons I've already talked about. So also the mistreatment of biological life of the animals we eat. So not only are they largely raised inhumanely, what we eat contains most of what we eat contains many chemicals and toxins and ingredients actually harmful to us. So we have become disconnected from nature. We become disconnected with biological life and with what we eat. And this has resulted in destruction of the health of the planet and also ourselves. A lack of purpose and identity. So now, in the technological society we live in, our purpose and identity is intertwined with our profession, what we do for work, what we produce, how efficient we are at our jobs, and other things. And not only these things, but these are the main sources of identity that we have, really. And these things are superficial, they're surrogate identities, they're not rooted in anything tangible, really. The purpose they give us, I don't feel is fulfilling enough. The identities we have, they lack something. And I think most of us feel that. And I think it really points to the unnaturalness of the technological society we live in now. I also put in here an unhealthy relationship with death. So I think we have a very, speaking as a collective and as someone who lives in Western society in the US, a pathological relationship with death. Living in nature, death is accepted. We see it as a natural part of life. It happens, it's a transition period. And when we live with nature, we live a full life. We live a life of purpose, of autonomy, of empowerment. We are providing for our needs, but we are really providing for our needs. We're not going to the grocery store and providing that way. We are actually catching our own food. We are constructing shelter. We have hands-on autonomy and say over our existential needs. And I think these things are very important parts of life that we lost, and part of the reasons why we have such a pathological relationship with death. And you can see it in society with the tools, the obsession with life prolonging technology, the development of it. I've been talking about this technological imposition. To sum it up, technological intelligence / industrial technological society and the system it created is imposing its way of life onto humanity. It seeks constant expansion over human life and utilizes technology and technological techniques to influence, manipulate, control, mold, and shape human behavior. It coerces and forces assimilation into a technical way of life. It takes away human independence and autonomy, enforces dependency. It gradually encroaches on human freedom until we are forced to compromise for our own survival. It seeks control over nature and with it the human spirit. Complete dominion over all life is the end result it moves towards. The nature of technological imposition is to expand and assimilate every individual. The most efficient form of slavery is when the slaves are unaware of their servitude. And this is how I feel about the situation. That we are in a state of technological slavery that we are largely unaware of.